Now it's time to introduce our guest, Sandra Senou, a mother of a disabled child. She has found a way of supporting families in similar situations who are often completely helpless, listening to them, providing material assistance, and also helping them to accept their child's disability is the mission she has set for herself with her aptly named association, Our Extra Capable Children, Nos Enfants Extra Capables. She has shared her priorities with Laurence Soustras and Thierry Schiller. Sandra Senou, hello. Thank you for joining us on Initiative Africa.
Bonjour.
You've set up an association to help parents of disabled children, including yourself, the mother of a disabled child, Alexandre, who is now 13. What was your aim?
I am Sandra Senou, mother of 3 children, the eldest of 13 years old, Alexandre. In 2022, I set up the Nos Enfants Extra Capables Association. It's an association that, as you say, supports the family of children with disabilities. Firstly, by helping them to accept their disability, but also by providing them with everything they need in terms of awareness, training, and equipment, whenever possible, for us to welcome and support children with disabilities. Why did I set up this association? As the parent of a disabled child, I realize that parents are often powerless when faced with their child's disability. It's true that in France, children are looked after, but parents are not always looked after. And it's even worse in Africa because children are not always looked after. They are not taken care of. Parents are at a loss and don't know what to do for their children. The first step is diagnosis, which is not always done. So if a child is found to be different, we don't know what's wrong. Parents are at a loss. So the aim of the association was really to provide parents with a place where they can be listened to, where they can be supported. Together, we can put in place actions to, above all, take charge of the child they have.
You talk about the great suffering of parents. How is this expressed and how can it be alleviated in concrete terms?
The suffering of parents often takes the form of loneliness. Parents find themselves alone and destitute in every way. Psychologically, because they are suffering, having a disabled child is not a trivial matter. When we have children, as I like to say, we have them because we imagine that our children will do this and that. But when the child arrives, and it's different from what we already thought, we have to mourn the loss of the normal child. Even then, it's a great deal of suffering for the parents. You have to accept that, and it's not always easy. Then you have to support the child. How do you support a child whose pattern you don't know? We have a classic scheme for supporting an ordinary child, a child with no disability. But for a child with a disability, there is no system in the world to support them. So again, parents isolate themselves because they don't know where to turn. They don't know what steps to take. They don't know how to educate this child. Of course, they'll do it instinctively, but there are no rules. As a result, parents are already suffering and isolated. But we also have the suffering caused by institutions that do not implement or provide the resources for families to support children with disabilities.
You've organized support groups in your association. Is the key, in the end, to talk?
It's not. It doesn't solve all the problems. You have to be prepared to talk. I remember when I found out about my child's disability. I didn't feel like talking. I was offered discussion groups, but I didn't feel like talking. I hadn't accepted my child's disability. What do I want to talk about? But once you've accepted, you need to talk. You need to express how you feel. And we don't dare tell everyone. You don't dare tell anyone because you think others don't understand what you're going through. But when you meet up with other parents going through a similar situation, you feel better understood and lighten the load you carry daily, those worries. What's my child going to be like tomorrow when I'm no longer here? What is he going to be like? How will I bring him up, do this or do that? Where I am going to send him to school? I can't do it at home. It's not suitable. And talking to other parents also helps us to find ways of improving our support for this child, but also to lighten up mental load because it is a mental load. So yes, talking doesn't solve everything, but talking is necessary.
Before setting up your association, you began writing books. Les Aventures d'Alexandre, Volume 1, Le Rêve d'Alexandre, Volume 2, and Alexandre, le Centre de Loisirs. You're now preparing a third volume. What is your aim with this book, which is both for children and parents?
The first objective was to remove the taboos surrounding disability. When Alexandre was little, I read a lot of books to him and realized that there wasn't a book where there was a child with a disability. We talk about heroes who run, do this and do that. But I thought my son couldn't do that. It was frustrating. So I said to myself, well, maybe we'll write our first book with a little story that children can read before going to bed, but that also allows them to take ownership of their disability, to allow the children to see pictures of a child in a wheelchair, if that's the case, which was the case of the first book for Alexandre, in a wheelchair, so that he could say, oh, okay, what's that? Talking about disability in the home allows parents to talk about it, because we know that if we don't meet someone with a disability or in a similar situation, we won't spontaneously talk about it. Book allows us to communicate and have other subjects to discuss, such as disability. The second book is for children aged 6 to 10. It's bilingual. It's a book that goes further. It talks about disability, but not just motor disability. It also talks about autism. The aim is really for children to understand that, okay, there's a disabled child in front of me. He's a different child, but in the end, he's just like us because he has the same emotions and desires. Even if they don't do things like we do, they can do them differently. So we will talk about adaptation, self-confidence, and accepting others. So the aim is really to raise awareness of these issues, to lift the taboo on disability, to raise awareness of harassment, to show that difference is not inevitable and that we can do things differently.
And podcasts serve the same purpose, to raise and make people more aware?
The podcast too, yes, but it was really to show, the podcast aimed to show the day-to-day life of a family of a child with a disability. How do they cope with this situation? What do they put in place? In the stories that we often hear in the podcast, the beginnings are usually shared. Still, we can see that in each story, each family and each parent has put something in place to support and accept their child's disability and go beyond the limits that disability can represent, to support this child towards what they are capable of doing despite the disability, towards a happy life, I like to say, because we often stigmatize the families of children with disabilities, saying that we're unhappy. I admit our daily lives are not easy, but that doesn't mean we're unhappy. We're happy. So podcasting is my thing. Okay, there's this situation, but we have a life and managed to get past it.
Let's discuss your activities in Africa. Your association is present in at least 7 countries. How does that work?
So, we operate through local channels. Since I am not on site, I often rely on local associations that are already carrying out initiatives. My role is to come in alongside the association as a complement. We will bring awareness and training because I have trained to be a project manager of disability and inclusion. This allows us to raise awareness but also to train professionals, families, etc. on issues related to disability. So the goal is really to provide a local complement alongside the association.
And what specific issues have you noted about the problems faced by African parents of children with disabilities?
Rejection. There is a lack of infrastructure and facilities to send children to school and care for them, and there is a shame for those around them. I was recently in Côte d'Ivoire and the shame really struck me. Society's rejection of children with disabilities who are called children who are dead, children who don't deserve to live, or whatever you want to call them. And it is still a big taboo in Africa.
It's very hard.
It is very, very violent. It is very violent because children are often told, Listen, he doesn't deserve to leave. We'll leave him somewhere. He's going to die because he doesn't deserve to leave. Or if the mother is a shopkeeper, no one will buy from her. For them, children bring bad luck. And you can't buy from the mother of a child who brings bad luck. The family often rejects her. Husbands abandon their wives because, well, no, she's bad luck. It's very, very violent. Parents experience deep pain and loneliness due to insufficient support from public institutions.
Does this mean you have to change your work and the form of support you provide to local associations?
Often, yes, because we adapt. And when I go on site, it allows me to say, okay, we're going to work on this specific issue because it's the most commonly encountered. For example, when we talk about rejection, it involves working with the parents and psychologists, not just me, but also other trained professionals, to help them understand that they are not responsible for their child's disability. Yes, your child is capable of doing something if you support them, if you give them love. So we slightly adjust the support we offer to the people on site to help them better cope with their child's disability.
What about the responsiveness of public authorities in Africa, since one of the keys is education, access to education?
Oh, it's still difficult. There are some countries that are on board, but right now it makes me a little sad to realize how little attention public authorities are giving to this issue. Yes, it's on paper, but in practice, not always. There's still a lot to be done, just adapting the infrastructure, just enabling children to go to school. How can parents who don't have the means afford to send their children to a private school or to get rehabilitation? Children often need rehabilitation several times a week, and it's expensive. Are they going to pay for it if they don't have the means? So there needs to be support for these parents. There needs to be guidance for these parents so that children can be properly cared for. And for now, there is still extremely little being done.
What would you recommend in concrete terms? Adapted infrastructure for certain schools, specialized schools, school life assistance, or jobs that don't yet exist in Africa?
In some African countries, inclusive schools are being tested, or rather, inclusive classes are being tested. It could start there. This avoids the need to build an entire structure, but it does require training staff and adapting the facilities. However, it also allows children to be in school with other children, to be educated. However, not all types of disabilities can be addressed, and not every child can be enrolled in a regular school. There is also a need to build specialized facilities to accommodate children with disabilities, where they will have the necessary staff and supervision to relieve families and give these children a future.
Sandra Senou, thank you for your time.
Thank you.